What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Conor Benn, 20 wins and 0 losses, taking on Chris van Heerden, 28 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. This is really a fight that not too many people are super excited about, but that doesn't mean that there aren't interesting aspects of the fight. The reason why they wouldn't be excited is because this is Conor Benn's least exciting, opponent in terms of the gradual step-up fights that he's been having out of his past like 3 or 4. And the way that Conor Benn has been passing these tests, these gradual step-up opponents, has been phenomenal, pretty much exceeding all expectations. And often when we see a prospect turn contender, which Conor Benn is, there's always a bunch of questions that have to get answered, and sometimes people are slower in believing in the fighter and their abilities in some cases than others. And for instance, if you have like a huge puncher, in the case of Edgar Berlanga, who was knocking out his first 16 opponents out in the first round, a lot of people were skeptical, like that's not sustainable. Let's see what else you have when the fight goes into the middle rounds, or when you fight somebody who's a good mover or a good jabber. You always have some sort of like skepticism when it comes to many of these prospects, less so with guys like Vergil Ortiz, because I feel like he was checking so many of the boxes early to where people weren't that concerned about, okay, I wonder how he's going to deal with this or that. Although, some questions still linger. He has had his chin checked a couple times, and he handled it fairly well, got rattled a couple times. But in the case of Conor Benn, he's the son of a legend, and sons of legends often get extra scrutinized just because in more cases than not, they don't end up living up to the accomplishments of their legendary, fathers. Like, what are the chances that they would? Just in terms of in the world population, the chances that you are in like the top 0.001 percentile of people who are gifted in this particular craft, the chances are fairly small that you're going to live up to that same standard set by the legend. It's just very, very unlikely. And so Conor Benn has been met through the past several years with a lot of skepticism. Some people see, okay, he's a really good athlete who appears to punch pretty hard, has decent hand speed, but, he doesn't have a high boxing IQ, or he's not going to be able to handle somebody who's like mastered the sweet science and is a little bit more technical. But, unless I'm missing something, he is looking pretty damn phenomenal. Like the way that he is going about stopping a Chris Algieri, or the way that he dusted off, Samuel Vargas in the first round. Errol Spence fought Samuel Vargas. He didn't do that to him. Vergil Ortiz fought Samuel Vargas. Didn't do that to him. I think Amir Khan fought Samuel Vargas. Didn't blow him out quite like that. So Conor Benn, he doesn't have like a crazy reach. He's not super tall for the division. He does look like a pretty strong welterweight. And again, we saw him start coming up like in 2016, 17, 18. Then he started fighting slightly better fighters like Koivula, and then 2 fights later, Formella. He knocked Koivula out in the second round. He went the distance with Sebastian Formella. Formella's the guy who Sean Porter fought after the Errol Spence fight, which was pre-COVID. So Formella was the guy who Porter fought during that COVID 2020 year, and he beat him via decision. So Formella is a pretty durable guy. Well, Conor Benn passed that test. That was about 4 or 5 fights ago, November 2020 we're talking. Then Conor Benn fights Samuel Vargas, again, knocks him out in the first round. I hadn't seen anybody just totally obliterate Samuel Vargas in such a quick fashion before. And then he has the next fight against Adrian Granados, who, if you ask me, the Adrian Granados who was super competitive against Adrian Broner, pretty competitive against Sean Porter, that's not the same Adrian Granados I saw fighting Conor Benn. The one who fought Conor Benn in September of 2021 was not really willing to engage. He really wasn't trying to bring the fight to him the way that he was bringing the fight to even Danny Garcia. He got stopped by Garcia. He didn't get stopped by any of those other guys I mentioned, but Granados got stopped by Garcia. But if nothing else, we always see him giving a super high-spirited effort, basically giving as good as he gets for as long as the fight goes. Durable, tenacious, a pretty quality fighter. Well, by the time this fight hit like the 3rd or 4th round, it appeared that Adrian Granados really didn't want the smoke with Conor Benn. Ended up pretty much being a mover for the rest of the fight. Wasn't really willing to engage. Conor Benn pretty much settled for a very lopsided unanimous decision win. Like, it's hard to find rounds to give Adrian Granados in that fight. So that was one of those, well, damn, dominant performance, but you kind of wish that you got more out of Adrian Granados. You want to see the rising prospect get pushed so you see how he handles different levels of adversity. We didn't get that against Adrian Granados, but he did go the distance. And then Conor Benn had the next step-up fight against Chris Algieri, who, pretty much made his name upsetting Ruslan Provodnikov, moving around the ring and outboxing him in a close but pretty clear decision win. Chris Algieri also went the distance against Manny Pacquiao, got knocked down several times in that fight, but went the distance against Pacquiao. Also fought a pretty competitive fight with a still near prime Amir Khan. And so Chris Algieri, if nothing else, has kind of been a litmus test of sorts. Even though we haven't really seen him against top tier or even near elite competition in the past few years, we haven't seen Chris Algieri fighting the best in the way that he used to several years back. But Algieri, if nothing else, stays in very good shape, has been, kind of a student of all these different dietary methodologies and basically ways of aging gracefully and staying in the best shape possible as you enter your mid and then late 30s. So we were getting an age, but at least on the surface, still competitive spirited Chris Algieri. Well, when Conor Benn went against Algieri, and a lot of people thought that Conor Benn was going to have some issues with Algieri, who's known to be a mover, known to be a very good jabber, very good technical boxer, a sweet science guy. People thought, okay, let's see what Conor Benn does against him. Well, not only did Conor Benn knock Chris Algieri clean out in the 4th round, and I mean one of those where it's like a slow descent and it's a Tim Burr face-first scenario. It was an ugly knockout to where the referee went up to Conor Benn and his legendary dad, Nigel Benn, and basically said, hey, can you calm down the celebration? We've got a guy half asleep over here who's being tended to by the doctors. One of those types of deals. So then it kind of muted the celebration of Conor Benn, who obviously after he hit him with the 1-2, beautiful setup. Like he was changing levels, jabbing to the body, right hands to the body for the whole fight. And I was saying that not only did he knock him out, but he dominated just about every moment of those 3 to 4 rounds before the knockout. But yeah, they ended up having a muted celebration because understandably Conor Benn was like, just jumping around, super ecstatic when he landed that 1-2 knockout combination that, again, we've seen Chris Algieri hurt. And we have seen Chris Algieri stop. Errol Spence Jr. destroyed Chris Algieri in a few rounds. But that was like the only time I've seen Chris Algieri get obliterated. This would be the second time. And unlike the Errol Spence fight, this was one of those where you just punch the guy and detach them from their senses. It was that bad of a knockout. And again, it's not like the guy just overwhelmed Chris Algieri with brute strength and force. No, he was very technical, and he is getting so much better fight after fight to where, I had my doubts on Conor Benn a couple years ago. I'm like, how much can you really expect somebody who is kind of getting thrusted into these high-profile situations gradually before their accomplishments really merit that type of attention? And obviously, you're gonna get that type of attention because you are the son of a legend. But my question was, is Conor Benn more like a Shane Mosley Jr. or is he a Floyd Mayweather Jr.? Well, chances are he's probably somewhere in between, right? Maybe a Chris Eubank Jr. or something. I don't know. But his performance against Chris Algieri pretty much just checked a couple more of those boxes because now, no, it's not just a guy who's able to kind of blitz you with nice combinations. Online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer would refer to Conor Benn as a mid-range hooker. That's a term that Dwyer pretty much coined, but he wouldn't be wrong about that in assessing Conor Benn. But Conor Benn is a lot more sophisticated than people, I think, have given him credit for. He changes levels very well. He feints very well. And, maybe he was fighting. I think on some level he was fighting not only an age Chris Algieri, but with that age comes older legs. If you watch Chris Algieri several years ago versus Chris Algieri, who fought and got knocked out by Conor Benn in the 4th round, he didn't have the same movement. He just didn't. By the 3rd round, he was kind of flat-footed. And if you just look at the feet, just watch the feet, Conor Benn actually had more lively feet than Chris Algieri, and he was getting the foot position he wanted, and anytime the foot position was close, it was Conor Benn who was quickly feinting his way into jab range and then getting the jab off. So if they were to both deploy the jab at the same time, it was Conor Benn snapping Algieri's head back with the jab. Very educated jab work from Conor Benn. So that impressed me as much as anything, although that right hand was very impressive. But Conor Benn also has a devastating left hook to the body. So if you're able to kind of feint the guy out of position, get the angle that you want, you pretty much have a split second to get that left hook to the body off. Errol Spence is a master of that, kind of getting the foot position, feinting your way into the angle that you want, taking that lateral kind of pivot, lateral step, so then you could have that millisecond of an opening to let that left hand to the body go. Conor Benn was able to find several situations to get that off against Chris Algieri. So again, yes, he is a very good athlete, and he throws hard punches and nice, crisp, tight combinations. He's not flailing too much, and he's also got underrated upper body movement. So he's got the somewhat lively feet, pretty lively feet. He's not somebody who's just bouncing all around the ring, but his legs are young, and he's got intelligent footwork at this point. But he also has very nice upper body movement to where he was able to make Chris Algieri miss with like 4 to 5 punch combinations, where you are in the punching range and you are making every one of those 5 punches miss. So again, every time I see Conor Benn step in the ring, I'm kind of forced to reevaluate what his ceiling might be. So now he's about to take on Chris van Heerden, who, you know, several years ago, and I'm talking about like 10 years ago, he held an IBO belt, which isn't really considered one of the 4 major sanctioning bodies today, but it would be the 5th. You know what I mean? IBO is kind of like one of those, you know, if it was a Gilligan's Island theme song, it's the Professor and Marianne, and the rest, right? At the end of the theme song. It's like Y in vowel sounds. It's not A-E-I-O-U. It's the sometimes this and that. So IBO, well, I would say that the ring belt has more merit than the IBO belt. But I feel like IBO belt used to have a little bit more credibility, and that's the belt that Chris van Heerden held like 10 years ago when he was beating guys like Matthew Hatton, and he had beaten Kaiser Mabuza for that then vacant IBO welterweight belt. So, you know, Chris van Heerden, you know, he had one loss for like a long time in his career, and then he fought Errol Spence Jr. in 2015. And, you know, that fight told me a couple things. It told me Errol Spence is for real. So this is around the time this is before Errol Spence beat Phil Logreco and then Chris Algieri. So this is a few fights before Errol Spence fought and beat Kell Brook for his share of the welterweight belt for the IBF title. Errol Spence was still a prospect on the come up at this time that he fought Chris van Heerden, and he hit Chris van Heerden with everything but the kitchen sink, and he became the first to not only knock Chris van Heerden down, because for a long time, through most of his career, Chris van Heerden had never been knocked down. And Errol Spence knocked him down in like the 7th round or 6th or 7th round, and then finished him in the 8th round. But if you look at how much Errol Spence was breaking him off, Errol Spence was just hitting him with hard jabs and hard left hands. So again, it told me 2 things. It told me Errol Spence is for real. It also told me that Chris van Heerden is one tough son of a gun, because again, from the 1st round to the 8th round, he was getting blasted with Errol Spence combinations. And you know how hard Errol Spence Jr. hits. And Chris van Heerden would get hit by like a 5-punch combination and then would kind of shimmy his shoulders like, yeah, is that all you got? And he was doing that all the way up until the stoppage. And to be fair, he wasn't stopped as in knocked out and slumped. He was stopped as in the ref jumping in and saying, no, that's enough. And Chris van Heerden even then was kind of protesting the call. He really wanted to go the distance. And you know, I don't know if you ever come out of a fight like the beating that Chris van Heerden took the same after taking that sort of a beating. It was pretty damn nasty. Check out Errol Spence Jr. versus Chris van Heerden. But that's his only loss in like the past 10 years, 12 years or something. He's had 5 fights since, all against lesser competition. He's won all of those fights, all via decision. So Chris van Heerden hasn't knocked out any of his past 5 opponents. In fact, even before that loss to Errol Spence, he's never been much of a knockout artist. The vast majority of his wins are via decision. He's one of those attrition guys who'll just be there. He'll be there to take your punches and to give his punches. He's not the most sophisticated fighter. Again, he's tough as nails. Like, he's got a really sad story. His dad was shot and killed like 3-4 years ago or something. I saw like a ES News, Ellie Seckbag that video here on YouTube, and he was like talking to Chris van Heerden, and Chris van Heerden was explaining that, you know, yeah, after his dad got killed, which was a few months before the interview that they had, that the guy who killed him, and this is all South Africa drama. I think it's a lot of political drama that was taking place out there. And, you know, Chris van Heerden believed that his dad got killed for political purposes or reasons. And the guy who killed him got out of jail on only $300 bail. Ellie Seckbach thought it was like $300,000. And then Chris van Heerden's like, no, it was $300 bail. Pretty sad story, but yeah, Chris van Heerden, I mean, these fighters are really just cut from a different cloth in terms of toughness and in terms of just their backgrounds, you know what I mean? Chris van Heerden is no exception to that. Oh, you know what? I had said that Chris van Heerden had 5 fights. He actually had a 6, but it didn't go past the first round. It was actually against Jaron, Bout, Ennis, and it was stopped in the first round due to a clash of heads. A really nasty cut sustained on Chris van Heerden's forehead stopped the fight in the first round. This was in December of 2020. So Chris van Heerden hasn't had like a proper fight since August of 2019, since I don't even really count the one against Ennis since it didn't go past 1 round. So you'd have to look about almost 3 years since Chris van Heerden has been in like long sustained action. So that should also be factored in here. Not only that, but Chris van Heerden is now like 34 years old. Not that that's necessarily like a disqualifier. I mean, a lot of fighters fight well beyond that, but that plus the inactivity, plus you're going against somebody who's as young and talented and improving and skilled and seems like they are dedicated to being the best they could be in Conor Benn. It might spell just ugliness for Chris van Heerden. But what makes this one a little bit interesting is that if you look at Conor Benn's background, he has not been fighting any southpaws. Chris van Heerden is a lefty. If you look at like Conor Benn in his last like 10 fights, you'd have to go back to when he was fighting like 4 to 6 rounders to find him fighting a southpaw. So he hasn't fought a southpaw anywhere near the level of Chris van Heerden. So what I'm expecting in Conor Benn versus Chris van Heerden, again, the public isn't excited about this fight because this isn't even as interesting as a step-up opponent like Chris Algieri or Adrian Granados even. This is somebody who is like, who? But yeah, Chris van Heerden, he's not a bad fighter. He just came up very short against Errol Spence Jr., beats most other, you know, non-elite, non-near elite fighters. But here he's going against a potentially elite or near elite Conor Benn. So I expect Conor Benn to be, I don't expect him to just jump into the pocket and just deliver devastation in the way that he did against Samuel Vargas. Although, I mean, watching his last few fights, nothing really would surprise me with Conor Benn's performance levels at this point. I just think that he's going to have respect for the newness of fighting a southpaw. Chris van Heerden isn't a fast fighter. He's not quick reflex. He doesn't have super quick hands. He does throw like nice, you know, decent range combinations. So he will let his hands go if you let him keep going. And again, very durable. So he'll be there in the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round in most cases, unless somehow Conor Benn is able to set him up and obliterate him early or in the middle rounds. But I think that he's going to kind of take his time just a little bit. And I think we're going to see more of the, you know, feinting and kind of faking your way in. Basically establishing the boxing superiority first and then just finding more and more moments to just deconstruct and then destroy the opponent. So I'm expecting to see some straight right hands, and that's the thing. So he's fighting a southpaw here. So what do you want to do? You don't want to try to exchange a jab that Chris van Heerden could counter over the top with like a left hand. You want to throw perhaps like a straight right lead. So I suspect that Conor Benn's working on that. But until Conor Benn, however long it takes to get to Chris van Heerden's chin and to wobble him, drop him, stop him, or just, you know, hit him with punches that he can no longer just really defend himself and have the ref jump in and spare him, until then, I look for Conor Benn to do a lot of damage to Chris van Heerden's body because I suspect that at 34 years old and with the inactivity, that Chris van Heerden's body might be more suspect than his chin at this point. So I actually have Conor Benn, you know, more or less winning the rounds, maybe being a little bit slower in the first 2 to 3 rounds versus van Heerden, but still winning those rounds, but to really get cooking in the middle rounds to where you could get a late stoppage. Probably something where you just start blasting him with, like, you know, hooks to the body or even a straight right to the body. if he lands hard straight right up top, I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up dropping Van Heerden. I just think that it's just as likely that he hits him with like a hook to the body at some point that finally gets Chris van Heerden to kind of turn away and take a knee or something like that, to where he starts defending his body more than the head, and then that opens up an attack up top for Conor Benn to finish him that way. But I don't see this going the 12-round distance. I mean, maybe if this goes into the middle late rounds and Chris van Heerden is still there to try to apply pressure and to make Conor Benn work and work and work, and you just keep on coming, maybe you could expose like a lack of endurance in Conor Benn. Maybe that's possible. I just think it's more possible that, you know, 36 minutes is a long time to take a beating, and I don't think that Chris van Heerden has the same structural integrity that he had back when he was taking a beating from Errol Spence back in 2015. That's 7 years ago. So I think that Conor Benn is going to get probably a middle, but more likely late round stoppage. I'm thinking maybe round 9, round 10, something like that. So I'm taking Conor Benn by stoppage. The question is, if Conor Benn does pass this test and get by, again, the first southpaw that he's going to have fought in a very long time, basically since his career started to take off to where eyeballs were on him and he was no longer fighting just like 4-rounders or 6-rounders. First southpaw that he's really been in with. But if he gets past Van Heerden, the problem that they're running into is, if it's not going to be like a Kell Brook or somebody who can work out some sort of a cross-promotional deal to fight Conor Benn at 147, the waters just aren't that deep and the roster isn't stacked in terms of matchrooms, welterweights. But you can potentially fight another DAZN, because it's both matchroom and Golden Boy, whose fighters fight on DAZN. You can potentially get a Conor Benn versus Virgil Ortiz Jr. cross-promotional fight between Matchroom and Golden Boy on DAZN. But aside from that, it's going to be really hard to tell how good Conor Benn is against elite competition, because PBC controls by far the lion's share of the elite talent at welterweight. And it's not even close. Like, just about all of basically everybody except for Terrence Crawford and Virgil Ortiz is on PBC in the welterweight division in terms of elite fighters. So I don't know how they're going to match make for Conor Benn going forward to really see how good he is and if he could win, you know, any belts, or if he could challenge for any belts at welterweight. It's going to be interesting to see how Eddie Hearn and company game plan that one. But yeah, let me know what you think about Conor Benn versus Chris van Heerden. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.